Welcome to Digital Publishing Online, and I'm Lisa Gabrielle. And in this video, I'm going to discuss with you uh, the proper handling of images when working in InDesign and trying to overlap images on top of each other. There's a couple things we're going to need to be aware of and specific technique that is requiring some skills in Photoshop in order for you to work with images that overlap each other in InDesign. Now, the reason I have this handout up on the screen, and I went over this handout with you a couple videos ago, is I'm going to make reference to a couple areas in here that are pretty important for you to be aware of. And I've already mentioned these areas in the last video I made this week, but I'm pointing it out here in this handout. Since you'll be working in Photoshop and since the videos this week are discussing Photoshop, basically what I'm talking about is this information over here. And I mentioned in the previous video, the one right before this one, about resolution. And I was talking to you about how to set the resolution in your images. I was also making reference to file formats that you can save out of Photoshop. And those formats are also listed here. So just to remind you, if you didn't write them down, they're actually in this handout. You can just follow this handout. Also over here are the resolutions that are optimal for what you're working on. And in this particular example, the project that you're working on, this resolution 150 to 200 proofing on an inkjet is what we're going to be working with. And I also mentioned in the previous video, we're going to try and stay on the lower resolution end of that range. So we're going to be working with 150 because this is an online class and we don't really want our images to get too big. 200 DPI images can get quite hefty in size, and I don't want you guys uploading all of this information at the end when you package this to the online classroom and having issues. So we'll try and keep all of our images at 150 as mentioned in the previous video. But that information is located here, and as a reminder, I wanted to point out this handout. So if you have this in your notes, you can refer to the application workout handout for that format information. Okay, so let's jump into InDesign and let's talk about what we're going to deal with once we start bringing our images into InDesign. Okay, so um, once you begin to bring all your content into InDesign, you're immediately going to have some issues with organizing, compositing, and layering your images. And one of the problems that kind of rears its ugly head right away is what I kind of have in front of you there, what we call in the industry masking. Okay, so in other words, what is masking? Well, let's say you have a field, which is this orange field back here. In your InDesign document, you have an image that you want to place on top that field. Traditionally, when you bring that image into InDesign, if you don't do anything to it, and you don't do anything to it in Photoshop either, it will come in, and actually I have this image. Let's see if we can bring this in. Um, will come in with a completely square background. So I'm going to go ahead and find that image. Where is it here? Desktop. And where is it? Oh, it looks like it kicked me off. Okay. Uh, I had the window for, oh, here it is. Okay, there's the image. So let's see. Okay, how come that's not showing when I look for in InDesign? When I do a place, it's not seeing the file server when I do a place. That's why I'm confused here. So forgive me here if I can maybe get to it from here. Teaching materials, there we go. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and bring this image in. Okay, what I did was, okay, is I accidentally Forgive me. I made a mistake. I had this selected and I didn't want that selected. Okay, so now I see it's so hard to make these videos quick when you have so many things you got to do here. Okay, all right. So now, all right. So you bring an image into InDesign and it comes in as a perfect square. Well, what if you wanted a situation like here where you had a part of an image or a particular product or what have you to actually sit on top of a field like this, but you wanted a transparent background. You did not want a square around the image. Well, you would have to create what's called a mask. And that's what we're going to talk about in this video. Okay? Because we don't want our images to be all squared out. We may want to cut out. Sometimes you also hear this technique referred to as silhouetting. Okay, now I've left for you in the classroom two handouts that will be very helpful for you in doing masking. I've got this handout, which is called How to Create a Mask with the Pen Tool, and I've given you this handout, which is called How to Create a Mask with a Selection. Depending on what your skill set is in Photoshop and depending on where you are in terms of understanding how to use masks or vice versa pen tool, um, you could choose whichever one of these masking effects to use. They both work. Industry standard in the professional world are pen tool masks because pen tool masks are the um, most clean and clear and versatile, where the alpha selection or the selection masks are not necessarily as clean of a mask and sometimes they can be jagged. So I'm just letting you know if you are hoping to get a job in industry, you may want to definitely hone your skills on pen tool masks. But if you're just wanting to get through this project quickly and you have some experience with making masks in Photoshop, then you can use this handout, which is called the How to Create a Mask with a Selection. Okay, so those are those two. Now, also, the other thing I wanted to mention to you is I had posted a link in a previous week with some beginner Photoshop tutorials that are free through Adobe. And I highly recommend you take a look at some of these. I'm also going to post a few more of these this week that were created by Adobe that you can watch that will help you kind of get through some of the simple Photoshop stuff that's required for this class. And if you're working in InDesign, there's virtually no way for you to work with images in InDesign and not have some basic skills in Photoshop. So it's a requirement. And I realize this is just an InDesign class, but there's really no way for us to move forward on this project without you having some Photoshop skills. So I've given you all the tutorials and hopefully all the beginning information that you need to get an introductory to Photoshop. And I highly recommend you take a look at these tutorials. There's some tutorials on how to straighten an image and to crop an image, something you may do or need for this project. How to clone out a simple blemish or something in an image that you want to get rid of. And that's a tutorial on that. And then how to fix a simple color correction on a photo. So these three videos could be very useful in helping you to just get an introductory to Photoshop and be aware of some of the basics you'll need for this project. Okay. And also, some of the Photoshop tutorials I'm posting this week will also help you to hone some of your skills in terms of masking and or pen tool uh, creation. So again, these handouts are in the classroom and these tutorial links are also in there. You can take a look at both of those. Okay. But back to InDesign here. So that will allow you to bring images in to InDesign that have a mask set around them. Now, also, the other areas that I'd like to tell you to reference as part of doing your work on masking and layering of images in InDesign is in your book. Okay, and um, you may remember doing this chapter. Don't remember what week we did this, but chapter 10. I don't have my schedule in front of me, so I'm not sure which week you did this, but in chapter 10, you did um, this clipping pat work in that it talks about once you create masks or alpha channel masks in Photoshop and or pen tool paths in Photoshop, what do you do with the images once you bring them into InDesign? And this section of the book, and that starts with page 261 and goes to page, I think it's um, 269, I believe. Let's see, what page is this? Yeah, 268, and then all the way to, yeah, to page 269. It talks about some of the features that are built into InDesign to help you work with Photoshop paths and alpha channels, which those two handouts I gave you are referring to how to create those paths or alpha channels in Photoshop. So just so you understand, first you have to do a certain amount of basic work in Photoshop to your images to get them to be, I guess you can call this transparent, this example here, to get the background to be transparent. And then once you bring those images into InDesign, there's also a couple things you have to do to those images in InDesign to get those alpha channels and paths to work. Okay, and that's explained here in your book. All right, so I'm not going to actually go through the lengthy process that it takes to do all of that. I'm merely just referring you to all of the different areas in the classroom that should help you do that. So simply put, what I recommend you do is first go into the classroom and decide where your skill set lies with this. If you're better at pen tool or if you're better at selection masks, okay? Once you make a decision on that, choose the handout that will work for you. So let's say you're a person who prefers to work with a selection mask. Take this handout, print it out, and go into Photoshop and open up your images. Okay, so you'll go into Photoshop and you'll open up your images and you'll proceed to follow the handout to create that alpha channel mask. And it tells you in the handout how to save it out and everything. Once you're finished with that, you'll get yourself into InDesign and you'll place those images into InDesign just how I did here. You'll place them in and then you'll proceed to follow the book chapter. Let's see, the book. Oops, here it is. Chapter here on importing and modifying graphics. You'll work with this. This also, some of this information is also stated in that handout about using clipping paths in InDesign. It's a very simple feature, and if you go back here, you'll notice that I've actually used it. So this image here is brought here into InDesign, and under the, let's see, where is it? Under clipping path options, you'll see here that in my Photoshop document, okay, all right, here's what I'll do. I'll open this document here, this one. Let's see, just so this makes more sense. Okay, so this image right here in InDesign is the TIFF image. So I'm going to go ahead and select that TIFF image in my links box, and I'm going to come over here where it says Edit Original, and it should open that image straight up into Photoshop, so that I could kind of go through this with you. So it makes more sense. I'm just trying to, so hard to make these videos short, but once I get in here, there's just so much to talk about. Oh, I guess it didn't work. Okay, so we're going to have to select the image here and pull down to edit with, and then just physically say edit with Photoshop. Okay, and that should open the image. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so here's that image open in Photoshop. And I believe in the alpha channel area, I have created a mask, and you can see it here, duck mask alpha. See it? Okay. And that handout tells you how to do this. All right. You save it as a, now notice that I still have my background here. Okay, so my background is still intact. All I've done is I've created this mask. You save out the file as a TIFF, I believe, in the handout. Let me go back here to this handout here. I believe I tell you in this handout to save out either as a PSD or a TIFF. Either one will work. Okay, let's go back to Photoshop. Okay, so here is your alpha channel mask. I take this file and I save it out as a TIFF or a PSD. Back here in InDesign, I bring it in and it looks like this. Okay, but when it first comes in, it doesn't look like this. What I have to do is I actually have to come up to the clipping path options. Whoops, selected the wrong one. A little bit too fast there. Options. And I select alpha channel and I select my duck mask alpha, which is the one that is um, that I just showed you in Photoshop, that I created in Photoshop. And I say OK. And what that does is you kind of see here how it brings in that alpha channel mask, and I'm able to clip out that background. Okay, so it's a combination of part of the work done in Photoshop and then exporting the file out, and another part of the work being done in InDesign. So um, you'll get the hang of it as you start working with images and start overlaying things and start trying to deal with some of the complexities of building um, documents in InDesign. And again, in the previous project, your book designs, you kind of got into doing this, but we didn't get this advanced at doing it. So in this project, you're going to be dealing with some of these issues like this. So hopefully you're able to fix all your images and get everything working for you in InDesign. You can post any questions you have about this in the problems and solutions, and I guess happy page layout making.